Many of you know from previous videos I have a Chinese diesel heater. Had a problem with it. Everything's a mess in here because I'm in here tearing stuff apart and redoing stuff and fixing stuff and everything else. I got the fuel tank hanging out over here. In any case, I was having a problem with my heater. I got it, direct from the factory. It came inside of a case. The fuel pump, which is down here, used to be up right here, attached to this side piece. It was up at an angle. It had a hose on this side coming from the tank, and it had a hose that ran down this side from the pump to the heater. An issue that I kept having with it was I would bleed the line. So it used to be where this line that's currently feeding from the tank, that was the line that fed to the heater. And it used to be the super short line on the other end of the fuel pump right now was the line that fed from the heater to the pump. I gotta redo the lines here. I'm gonna buy new and make them longer so I can put stuff where I want it. But problem I was having is these pumps cavitate. I don't know why or how or whatever, but they cavitate just a smidge, and it sends these little micro bubbles into the line. When it was up here, the line was coming up and then going down, okay? So I would bleed this line that was coming up and then going down, and no matter what, no matter if I changed the angle of the pump and sent the line at an angle straight down instead of up and then down, it didn't matter. The bubbles would congregate inside the line, and eventually the line would be full of bubbles, and it wouldn't be getting adequate fuel supply to the heater. And this caused a bunch of flameouts that I was unaware of that happened over the course of probably 120 hours of use, and those flameouts resulted in a massive buildup of soot inside the system. So when I would go to start it, it sounded like thunder, like explosions were happening inside the burn chamber, and it sounded like the fire was going to come out of the intake. So the intake for the burn chamber. So, in any case, I was a little bit worried about it. I took it off, I flipped it upside down, I sprayed some brake cleaner up in there, I shook it around, poured out a bunch of sludge. I did that a few times. It was just basically the soot mixed with the brake cleaner was making a sludge. 3 times of rinsing it out with about a half a can of brake cleaner total. And I put it back in here. I filled the tank up with kerosene, and I ran it on kerosene for probably a week or two before I started trusting it with diesel again. But in any case, it took it a minute. I switched these lines around that way. With it currently in its temporary setup, I can make sure I don't have any bubbles making to the pump. And then I only have, a 2.5 inch line going from the pump up into the heater itself. So the chances of the air bubbles building up the chances are gone, especially because the angle of the line is upward from the pump into the heater. So all the bubbles just rise up and get shoved into the burn chamber and don't get a chance to congregate and cause these issues. The first couple times that it tried to refire, it was still sounding like there was an explosion going on inside. It seemed like it was having trouble getting the flame completely redirected outward. It failed to fire on the first start. Smoked a whole shit ton because obviously you gotta bleed the line, and bleeding it put a whole bunch of unburnt fuel in the chamber for me. So one thing that I would recommend doing if you got a bunch of unburnt fuel in the chamber, there's no harm, no foul in... Oh, how would you go about that, though? Yeah, I was going to say, there's no harm, no foul if you got a bunch of unburnt fuel in the chamber. Giving it a couple inches of air after the pump so it has a little extra time for the glow plug to stay on before it starts getting fed. But then again, usually you're over-enriching the chamber when you're trying to bleed the line anyway. I would say if you know that you got all but 2 inches of line bled, you're probably okay, because that gives that glow plug a little extra time to burn, especially if you've had extra fuel in there before. I had pumped in a whole bunch of extra fuel when trying to bleed it, and it made it smoke like hell. But it is working. I've ran it for a while off kerosene. I've switched back to fuel. I haven't had trouble. Yeah, I haven't had any trouble at all. It's never once extinguished. Since then, I've never had any issues other than when, and you got to be careful of this if you use stuff without having it together. See that little spot on the wire? It rubbed through, getting stuck in between the pump and the base there, shorted out to the base, and gave me a fuel pump error. This thing even knows when its fuel pump ain't running right. So I separated that. I got myself some stuff to fix it with, and reset it, fired her back up, and haven't had any trouble since. So when I first had this problem, I emailed the manufacturer or whoever I bought it from on Amazon. I said, hey, I got a problem. They emailed me back saying, hey, send us a video. I took videos and put them on YouTube. I sent them the YouTube links. They wouldn't talk to me anymore. Now, had I known that the issue was caused from air bubbles being built up in this line and causing issues with soot buildup from improper extinguishing or improper flame outs, then I would have been able to handle it. Now, it tells you right in the book to keep the fuel pump below the level of the chamber, or the burn chamber, to avoid these issues. I knew when I got it and read through the book and read the instructions that the way it was manufactured here, with this pump being up here above the chamber, was probably what was causing its issues. But I thought, well, that's the way they put it together, so that's the way I'm going to leave it. But that was causing my problem. So the pump always has to stay below the burn chamber of the furnace and pointed in an upward angle, at least some, to make sure that all the bubbles that cavitate from the pump they rise to the top and just get shoved through the burn chamber before they have a chance to congregate and create any problems. Other than that, I've never had any issues. This thing is great. I have the remote control for it, which is wonderful. I use the remote control to start things for me in the morning, so I never have to come out to a cold van. Some things that I did not know about the remote control on past videos that I'm going to show you is, if you turn it on, you can change English to Chinese by holding down your OK button. There you go. Now it changed. This tripped me out when I first bought it because my pocket held the OK button one time and it went to English and I had no idea how. And I was like, oh, I have no idea how to do it. And then I ended up reading on a forum. So hold OK, goes back to English. Another thing you can do, this thing is not set up for high altitude. Maybe you don't want it on automatic. If you have it on automatic and you go up into higher elevations, it's going to run itself richer than it should. I don't know if this one has the ability to control on this remote fan speed separate from fuel pump speed. So fan chamber speed, well, chamber fan. Actually, I think the fans that run the chamber and the blower are connected together on one shaft. I may be wrong, but blower speed separate from pump speed. Reason why is the higher elevation you go, the more that you got to slow down that pump so it doesn't run too rich. I've heard that some of them can do it. If you turn this guy on, you hold your up and down arrows at the same time, it's going to change to manual mode. It's not doing it for me yet. I'm going to try it again. Manual mode. Okay, it just sent the pump speed up some. Set oil flow 2.4 hertz. So you can set your oil flow. It'll show you your casing temp. Shows you your power. It always reads voltage about a half a volt lower than it actually is. It's nowhere near 11.9 volts. So all it really lets you do is set your oil flow. I do wonder though if whatever you do with the oil flow, it also sets the airflow based on that. Well, anyway, I'll play with that more and see what it's all about. I won't do it on camera, but you can just change it from manual to automatic just by holding your up and down arrows together. And then it changes automatic from set the temp to, manual, which is pump control. Yeah, if you have the capacity to control the pump and slow it down respective to the fan, then, that's good. Otherwise, another thing you need to consider is just slow the process down in general. You can't run your pump at full bore when you're in high elevations. like you can at low elevation, just because there's not enough available oxygen inside the chamber at any given time. It's going to make up it's going to produce a bunch of soot, which is going to clog your exhaust and cause a bunch of issues, and might leave you like me at 38 degrees, 1 o'clock in the morning in the blowing wind, and I was in bed for 2 hours, and yeah, didn't have any heat anymore, and that was the beginning of a trip 1,000 miles away from home. Definitely wasn't a great time. Thankfully, I had a propane backup, but that wasn't fun either to have to live with that for a week. In any case, that's what you need to know, or what I was trying to tell you. Other than that, it's worth the money. You know, they got them for as cheap as $119 now. Doesn't come inside the casing, but they got them as cheap, all the parts you need, $119 on Amazon. It's quite incredible. People are using them to heat just about anything, and they really do work, and they really are safe. Non-volatile fuel, never stinks up the cab. You know, sometimes louder than you want it to be, but I've been thinking about taking this guy and putting it underneath the floor of the van, and then just, cutting 2-3-inch holes in the floor to direct, cold air out and warm air in. And then I won't have to listen to shit anymore. I'll just have nice warm air and a little bit of fan noise. But anyway,